Unbeliever what CIA did with Project MKUltra. The hidden birth of a mind control empire. The Cold War didn't start with fire. It started with fear. A fear so deep it made powerful men believe that morality was a luxury they could no longer afford. America had just watched soldiers return from Korea with blank gazes and rewritten loyalties. They spoke highly of their captors. Some denounced the United States entirely. Washington didn't see trauma or survival. They saw a weapon that could control minds. Inside a nondescript office in Langley, Virginia, a small group of CIA officials convinced themselves they were already behind. If the Soviets or Chinese had mastered brainwashing, then America needed something stronger. Something unstoppable. They found their architect in Sidney Gottlieb. To the world, Gottlieb looked like an ordinary scientist. To the CIA, he was their mad genius. He had a black budget and a simple command: control the human mind at any cost. No courtroom, no conscience, no one to say, stop. In 1953, the project was activated under a code name deliberately meaningless: unethical. Universities welcomed the money flowing in, never asking why the paperwork was always redacted. Doctors in psychiatric hospitals were told they were pioneers. Prison wardens were promised behavior-changing miracles. In reality, these places became laboratories of torment. People seeking help for depression or anxiety were secretly dosed with hallucinogens that warped their reality into nightmares. Students who thought they were taking part in harmless psychology studies spiraled into panic and psychosis. Prisoners became test subjects for drug-induced breakdowns. They were the unwitting volunteers in a silent war. The CIA wanted total domination of the human psyche. They wanted to fracture a mind, reshape it, then lock obedience inside it like a command waiting to be triggered. As Gottlieb's research grew darker, so did his confidence. He expanded into experiments with electroshock, sensory deprivation, and hypnosis, pushing human endurance until identity itself broke. Every result was stamped top secret. Files hidden. Victims forgotten. MKUltra wasn't just a project. It was a breach of humanity. And it had only just begun. The LSD experiments, breaking the human mind. The CIA believed the key to mind control might come in the form of a tiny drop of liquid. A clear chemical with unbelievable power, LSD. It wasn't a party drug yet. It was a classified weapon. Sidney Gottlieb and his team imagined LSD like a scalpel for the psyche. If it could tear apart a person's identity, maybe it could rebuild loyalty from the ruins. To test this theory, the CIA needed subjects who would not be missed, who could not fight back, who had no idea they were stepping into hell. So MKUltra expanded quietly into places where desperation lived. Hospitals, prisons, psych wards, university research labs. The public trusted these institutions. They had no idea that behind the doors, the CIA had turned them into psychological battlegrounds. Some victims were slipped LSD without warning. One moment they were drinking a cup of coffee, the next they were falling through a hole in their own mind. Walls melted, faces distorted, hours stretched into hallucinated lifetimes. Panic replaced sanity. Imagine waking up in a room you don't remember entering. Strapped down, lights burning into your eyes. Your thoughts twisted into something unrecognizable. Experiments were repeated over and over. Days without sleep. Recordings of screams and static blasted into ears. Doctors wrote notes with cold neutrality. Subject now compliant. At institutions like McGill University in Canada, psychiatrists partnered with the CIA to push the boundaries even further. Patients came to be healed from small issues like anxiety or postpartum depression. Instead, they were overdosed with LSD, placed in comas, and subjected to psychic driving, forced listening to messages repeated thousands of times to erase their identity. This wasn't treatment. It was psychological warfare. And then there was Operation Midnight Climax. The CIA set up secret safe houses in San Francisco. Prostitutes hired by the agency lured unsuspecting men into private rooms where their drinks were spiked with LSD. Hidden behind two-way mirrors, CIA agents watched like spectators of a twisted experiment. What would a mind do if reality suddenly tore itself apart? The CIA needed answers. Human dignity wasn't even a consideration. Victims stumbled out into the night with no explanation for what broke inside their head. Some never recovered. Some took their own lives. A few became haunting footnotes in classified files destined to be burned. The CIA had unleashed chaos on its own citizens. This wasn't patriotism. This was a government slipping into madness. And MKUltra was only growing more ruthless. The victims and the cover-up. Most people hurt by MKUltra never even learned its name. Their pain had been sealed inside vaults of classified ink. One of the earliest victims was Dr. Frank Olson, a U.S. Army scientist. He thought he was attending a simple work retreat. Conversations, coffee, colleagues laughing over drinks. He never saw the moment a few drops of LSD disappeared into his glass. Hours later, his mind was fracturing into terror. Olson told his wife he felt like he was losing his grip on reality. He feared he had done something terribly wrong, but couldn't explain what. The panic only worsened. 9 days after the dose, he fell, or was pushed, from a 13th floor window in New York City. The CIA called it suicide. His family was told to stay quiet. Case closed. Decades later, evidence surfaced that Olson may have been murdered to silence him. He wasn't the only casualty. Across America, people admitted to hospitals for minor struggles, depression, anxiety, the pains of everyday life, became unwilling soldiers in a war they didn't know existed. Many emerged empty inside, memories erased, identities confused. Some spent the rest of their lives institutionalized. Then there were detainees in prison experiments. Men already trapped by society were fed drugs that ripped their sanity apart. Notes recovered later showed agents observing with clinical fascination as prisoners spiraled into uncontrollable fear. A person's entire inner world was simply data. Even the CIA's own employees were targets. Trust meant nothing. Everyone was expandable. By the early 1960s, MKUltra had grown monstrous. The brutality no longer looked like national defense. It looked like the government had lost its humanity. Then something changed. A handful of suspicious senators began asking questions. Lawsuits threatened to expose the project. The CIA panicked. Files were gathered. Offices were cleared. Burn bags filled. In 1973, the director of the CIA, Richard Helms, ordered all MKUltra documents destroyed. Flames devoured decades of secrets. Most evidence turned into smoke. Helms wasn't covering up a project. He was covering up a crime against the human mind. Only a few misfiled documents survived the purge. Those scraps would later reveal enough truth to shake the nation. The victims deserved justice. Most never got it. MKUltra didn't fail because it was unethical. It failed because it almost got caught. And the world still had no idea what else hid in the shadows of this nightmare. The exposures and the unfinished truth. By the early 1970s, whispers of a secret war against the human mind could no longer be ignored. Rumors of drugged citizens, coerced subjects, and destroyed lives were seeping into the public consciousness. The CIA, a fortress of secrecy, was about to face daylight it never wanted. In 1975, the Church Committee convened. A Senate panel determined to peel back the layers of darkness. They demanded answers. How many people had been experimented on? How many had been broken? How had this gone on under the guise of national security? The fragments they uncovered were horrifying. Files burned, documents shredded, but enough survived to reveal the full scale. Hospitals, prisons, universities, all converted into psychological laboratories. Patients and prisoners weren't volunteers. They were human guinea pigs, unknowing and trapped. Imagine a man in a mental hospital, strapped to a cold metal bed, electrodes pressed to his skull, a tape recorder blaring messages into his ears for hours, days, weeks. Lights burning overhead like interrogators, never dimming. His mind stretched thin, reality bending, hallucinations blurring every line between sane and insane. In another city, unsuspecting men were lured by prostitutes into safe houses. A single drop of LSD in a cocktail shattered their perception. Behind the two-way mirrors, CIA agents scribbled notes, eyes cold, documenting the dissolution of identity as if it were a science experiment rather than a human tragedy. Even those at the CIA who began to question the ethics were silenced. Orders came from the top. Files must be destroyed. Evidence erased. Witnesses warned. Burn bags consumed decades of secrets in flames that smelled faintly of paranoia and betrayal. Yet survivors emerged. Fragments of memory, nightmares that would never leave, letters to lawmakers begging for acknowledgement. They spoke of terror, disorientation, and a world where they could no longer trust even their own thoughts. The church committee hearings revealed some of the truth, but only glimpses. Thousands of victims remained unaccounted for. Millions of psychological scars went unhealed. The CIA maintained its story, research for the nation's safety. But the nation had seen the cost. Humanity itself had been experimented upon. Minds had been shattered. Families torn apart. Lives ruined. MKUltra had left a stain that could never be fully erased. A reminder that power without accountability is the most dangerous drug of all. Even now, decades later, the shadows of MKUltra linger. Some secrets, perhaps, will never be known. The nightmare continues in silence, and the question haunts us still. How far will a government go when it believes the ends justify the means? MKUltra, the shadow that never left. MKUltra officially ended in the mid-1970s, but the damage had already been done. Lives were broken, identities fractured, and trust in institutions shattered. Thousands of innocent men and women had been used as weapons of a secret war they never knew existed. The documents that survive tell only part of the story. Countless experiments, hidden files, and destroyed evidence mean that much of the nightmare may never be known. The full scale of the psychological terror may be lost to history, but its echoes remain in the victims, the families, and the conscience of a nation. MKUltra was a grim reminder that when power is unchecked, humanity becomes expendable. What was justified in the name of national security became a chilling testament to what happens when ethics are silenced. Today, we look back not just to uncover facts, but to remember the victims and the price of secrecy. History often hides in the shadows, and it is our responsibility to bring it to light. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the terrifying story of MKUltra. If this story unsettled you or opened your eyes to the dark side of history, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Criminal Minds Archive for more stories of hidden crimes, untold conspiracies, and the minds behind them. Which part of MKUltra shocked you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your voice is part of uncovering history. Stay curious.